Hi folks, I'm International Master John Watson, and this is Ask the Master on ICC TV. Sorry for the delay. The main idea of this show is to provide players with a forum to ask questions about chess and the chess world. You can send these questions in advance, or if you're tuning in live right now on YouTube, there's a chat window on the right. You need to log into YouTube, and then you should see the chat tube, and you can ask me questions, the chat channel. There are a couple ways to submit questions in advance. The main one is to send an email to askimwatson@chessclub.com. That's ASKIMWATSON at chessclub.com. CHESSCLUB.com. So that's askimwatson@chessclub.com, and I can really consider those questions better. You can also send me games. You can send me comments, just observations you want to talk about, that maybe I'll comment about the chess world or some aspect of chess play. And you can send a question to my ICC handle if you're an ICC member. That handle is John L. Watson, JOHNLWATSON. I got a couple of those this week, actually. The alternative, of course, is to ask live right now on the screen, as Alan Llewellyn is already doing. And ask me any questions, and I'll try to get to those pretty promptly, because that's kind of a fun part of the show. And hi, Jordan, and hi, Big Karpov. Okay, how can I play the Yugoslav attack as white against the dragon? How can you? Well, you can do it legally. I'll go back up to Alan's question in a second. Let me see if there's anything else I have to say. Well, the questions you can ask, for example, when you send your emails or do it now, are so just some examples. You can ask about any chess opening or any position. You can send me a game. I'm sorry I haven't gotten to all the games I've sent. I'd like to do games when they're particularly kind of instructive for the viewers. But I welcome all games, and I'll try to get to more of them. I haven't put enough of them up, but I will try to do more of those. Please don't be shy about sending them. I don't guarantee I'll show them, but I'll try to. You can ask about chess strategy, which I've written many books over the years about strategy and openings. You can ask about chess books and videos. You can ask about any sort of general question about the world of chess, the various chess players, competitions, or anything else you can that comes to mind. I also should mention that you can comment and or ask a question on the YouTube channel itself below the YouTube broadcast. So even if you see it later, if you're not on right now and you see this later on YouTube, they're all archived and they're all sitting there on YouTube. You can put your questions below in the comment section, and I'll be looking at those after each show. So please feel free to do that. So that's one way to do it. You can also go to my Facebook page, John L. Watson. That's 3 words, L as in lion, John space L space Watson. And that has a list of all the openings that we've looked at over the course of this show over the many last months. But you can also ask a question there, as someone did last week, so that was kind of cool. Okay, so moving on to this week. Now, I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I've been asked and I think would be fun to cover, but let's just start in with what's already on the chat since you've been waiting patiently. One of the things is, how can I play the Yugoslav attack as white against the dragon? I'm not sure if you know what the Yugoslav attack is. Maybe that's what the question is. The Yugoslav attack is this. If black plays into the so-called dragon variation of the Sicilian, the Yugoslav attack. Now here is the dragon, this exact order of moves. And then if white plays this move, and black plays here, if black plays knight g4, you have this problem bishop b5 check, which is kind of a cute move because the knight's hanging, because that bishop's pinned. So black will tend to play here, threatening knight g4. White will stop knight g4. And this is, officially speaking, the Yugoslav attack for white. And white can play with either bishop c4 or castles, and there are actually other moves, for example, g4. So I guess that's the only thing I can say to that question. That's how you play it, is by simply playing the moves that constitute the Yugoslav attack. You might be trying to ask something a little different. Let me get back to what Alan said at the beginning up here. Whoa, he said a lot. I checked what my book on the Trush gave. Yeah, you might want to go back to last week to look at this question and to make sense of what this question is. So to clarify, he says his line went, let's take a look at this, c4, e6, knight c3, d5, E3. Oh yes, this one, which is kind of fun. A way to get into the semi-tirage. I still don't like this G3 move at all, but I guess we're still on that. As I pointed out, this A6 move here, which is interesting for black right at this point, but instead of that, we have this move, which you still give a question mark. And the book line is, oh, that's completely different. Yes. Yes, because the problem here is that you created, you blocked off your own bishop and made a move that doesn't help you develop this bishop because this bishop's going this way. So it's a waste of time, and it also blocks off your own bishop. The main line, now you're comparing this with the main Tarrasch line, and that's a very legitimate thing to do. It's too late to play the main Tarrasch line, though, because you've played this move E3. The main Tarrasch line, as you pointed out, goes like this, by transposition usually, and then captures knight here. I believe this is what you're saying. This is a very, very famous line, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of games from this position. And you just notice there's no E3 played in these lines. What does that mean? Very good, very good. It means bishop G5 is still possible. And for example, let me just show you this position, bishop G5 is the main move even, right here. Or bishop F4 is sometimes played, or even B3 is sometimes played. And D takes C5 sometimes is played, followed by bishop G5. So that's the difference really there, is the bishop goes to G2, but without wasting the move E3, which is both a tempo lost, but more importantly, it blocks this bishop from coming out. And so, sorry, correction to top line. Yeah, is the C takes D, knight takes D, which we talked about last week, and you can go back and look at that and say why I thought it was wrong for white to play that way. Do you play over the board often? No, I don't. I didn't play for about 6 to 8 years at all, maybe once, but recently I've been playing a little bit. So it's kind of fun to come back and try. I'm not very good anymore. It's you really have to be in practice. And I'm also a little older, but I'm having fun, and I've got some creative ideas going when I play, so that's fun. When is the stream supposed to start? A very good question. It should have started. My screen is frozen. Are you guys getting this? Let's get some feedback here. Are you getting this broadcast with the pieces moving? I'm actually frozen here, which I don't understand. Let me go back and make sure. No, according to this, it should be working. Yes, everything's fine except that when I'm watching the stream. I'm going to refresh my stream and see if this is working. Good, it is. Mine is working, I think. I think I'm doing it because the pieces aren't moving, but they are now, right? Like let me make a move now. This move. Do you see that? Yeah, thank you. I think there was a problem, as so often. Don't ask me why. Obviously not a tech god. So that's a good question. I play over the board with a bunch of people at Starbucks. We'd love to have you play with us sometime. Yeah, I'm in San Diego, by the way, folks. Yeah, okay. Jordan, just email me. Ask I Am Watson. You got that email address, and we'll see if we can clear that up. Maybe I'll come down. That'd be fun. What's so great about the Maroxy bind? I don't think anything's particularly great about it. It's a little depressing for black in the sense that it's hard for black to get winning chances. If black's trying to draw on a professional level, sometimes he uses this. Most of the top players don't anymore, though. One problem is getting to the Maroxy bind. If you play this move, now the Maroxy bind officially is the form of the Sicilian that goes this way, and then black plays here and white plays here, and that's the bind. These two pieces controlling the d5 square. And something like this can happen, for example, like that kind of thing. And the problem is black can't get the freeing move d5 in, and if he ever plays for e5, of course, there's a real problem with squares in the center. On the other hand, black's perfectly okay here. White's bishop is unimpressive, and there's plenty of ways for black to play it. A lot of people think white has just a very small theoretical advantage. Black has to suffer a lot. The main problem is black doesn't have enough counterplay. He can play for the move b5. So that's why you don't see it that much on a professional level. Now the other problem is how to get to it. If you play knight c6, white might play bishop b5, and a lot of people don't like playing against this as black. It's called the Rossalimo variation. There's all kinds of books on it. It's become extremely popular over the last 10, 15 years, and I think with good reason. I think it's awkward. You're playing an English. This is the English opening as black in one of the best systems for white, and it's just not It's not something that I'm fond of. And so to avoid that, a lot of people play g6. And we've talked about this on this show. That presents other difficulties. One of them is that you have this problem with tempo here, and then there's all sorts of complications, but maybe white can claim some small advantage. And if black ignores that, we went over in great detail this move, which isn't always played, but is quite a good move. And in fact, white gets a small advantage here too. So although that one's very, very interesting, there's a lot of interesting things black can do in that position. So I hope that answers the question. You can't always get to the Maroxy bind, and if you do get to it, anyway, let's say by something like this, then it's maybe not so satisfying for black because it's so hard to get winning chances. Okay, now let me get to some older stuff. That's one of the points of the show is you send me questions. I want to make sure I get to them, at least some of them. One question I got about from an ICC member is, when we were studying and analyzing a black line, why do we still look at it from the white side? And that's a good point. It's a thing I should probably do more often. I should just flip the board. It's traditional to look at it from the white side. So really I should have just shown you what I just showed you with that perspective, perhaps. It's one way to look at it. I'd say that's a very good question, and my answer is simply I haven't bothered to put it on the black side, which is an ICC function that I can do really easily with the word flip, by the way, if you guys ever want to flip your point of view. And I'll try to remember to do that more often. I'm not saying I always will, because I'm so wedded. The game comes up on the white side, and I'm sort of wedded to that habit, but I will try to take that into account. I think the first questions we have this week are from the white point of view, unfortunately, so I can't really illustrate that. Now, speaking of comments on my Facebook page, Brian Wall sent me a bunch of games. He's a life master from Colorado. He's won the Colorado Championship numerous times. He sent me games with what I call the nun variation. And now let me show you what that is, of the Milner-Berry Gambit. So this is a French defense. This is the Milner-Berry Gambit. Well, usually you play knight c6 first, but it's going to transpose. White's going to give up this pawn. And the way white gives up that pawn this time is not to play the traditional move here, but to play knight d2. And as I say in my book, this is the best way to make the Milner-Berry a respectable opening for white. This is at least a playable way for white. I think all the other lines probably favor black, if black knows what he's doing. So this is a very interesting line. I call it the nun. Brian calls this the Pap smear, typical Brian name, after the proponents, because there's a Misa Pap is the person who plays it, and David Smurden and Elisa Melakina also play it. So if you combine those names, you get Pap smear. And you shouldn't confuse this with the other Pap. That's Pap with one P. The other Pap line we looked at real briefly was, I don't know if you'll remember this, but a few weeks ago we looked at, I think it was December, maybe even in November, we looked at this little gambit, the Reti Pap it's called, where white gives up a pawn that way. Completely unrelated line, but just so you know about and that's with two P's. Okay, anyway, in this, let me show you a game. Brian sent some games, so let's look at some games with this. Now, what's white trying to do? Well, just get a huge... Okay, now that black played knight e7. The idea is in a position like this, white has this... Black hasn't successfully challenged that pawn, and it's very hard for him to do so, and these pieces aren't developed yet. So white's simply going to attack. White's probably going to drive the queen back, bring a rook over, and just try to get all his pieces into very quick activity. This pawn is a cramping pawn. That should be enough for a pawn. That's the theory. In this game, black plays here, hoping to actually lure white into playing knight takes d4. If black gets one more move, then either knight here or knight here looks pretty good. So he tries to bring the queen up and then gain a time attacking it. And in this game, black plays the oddball move queen g4, which Brian calls a novelty. I don't think it works out very well. This has been played a lot of times. And Brian has actually annotated this game, and he mentions this line in here. And I think here, for sure, black should play all the way back. The queen really belongs on d8 defensively in these positions, and plus it doesn't get hit on the open file. This position, I suspect, is perfectly okay for black, but it's also okay for white. White's got a lot of development. The other move that's played sometimes is this move. It's been played quite a lot. Trying to exchange queens, and then after this, playing back here. And then Brian gives this move, which is absolutely fine. But Soloviev, I noticed, I looked this up, recommends playing this move instead. And if black takes, of course, there's going to be a rook on the 7th, and that's not worth allowing, so I think black should go back again. But then white's staked out space on the queen side and has, a fair amount of compensation here. This is a reasonable position for both sides. Okay, so that's sort of the theory. And in this game, the queen gets sort of messed up on the king side. Probably black thought he was doing pretty well here, but white has the very clever... Now actually, white would be pretty well off just playing there, covering a lot of squares and developing really quickly. I like white here. I just think the queen's in a kind of poor square. It's almost trapped. But he plays a very violent line. Now that forces... The queen's run out of squares, so that forces queen takes, and now here attacking the queen again, and once again the queen's out of square, so it has to go there. And then here, threatening rook h1. It's great little sequence. And there's some complications here. I won't get too into this. One idea is that instead of just playing, for example, against a move like this, well, maybe after that, black can get away with rook takes or something, diverting either the queen from g4 or else allowing queen takes here. So unfortunately, something like this really doesn't work very well because black can white to play here for one thing, and now there's no knight hanging, and now play rook there, and the queen is trapped. So that now after this, there's no knight hanging. You can simply take back here, and white's much better here. Actually, I wonder if there's even a better way to do that. Just thinking here for a second. Let me just see how this looks. Okay, now materially, black's not that badly off yet. Rook for 2 pieces. But white's got a great initiative here. First of all, you can attack that queen. Where's that queen going? Oh, that's kind of clever. This is probably the point of the whole thing. I think that wins immediately. Queen has no squares, and if queen takes, rook f1. Okay, so that's one idea. Anyway, you get the idea. This is a big attack. And he goes through a bunch of other possible answers to the threat of rook h1 winning the queen, and there really aren't any good ones. The most important move is that after that, you don't really want to give him this much material for the queen. So what you do is instead of rook h1, you take first. And then after the king takes, now you play rook h1. And now black doesn't have enough compensation. He might have barely enough material, but his king's very exposed. And that's similar to what happens in the game. So I'll go through this quickly. What happens in the game is f5, and then he wins the queen. And this time, the king's a little too exposed. Notice the king side's been kind of exposed here, and that's why black doesn't have enough compensation for the queen. I'll just show you the moves. I don't think they're completely accurate. I think at any point if white had played bishop g5 over the next couple moves, he'd be very clearly better. Whereas here, maybe he's just a little better. Here, probably white should play this move, followed by rook h1, and try and just take over that pawn, or maybe even play here, and then take the pawn. Instead he plays here, and black's starting to get a little bit of play now because there are 2 open files on the king side against white's king. And there's also this nice long diagonal. So maybe, if black can get e5 in, he's doing well. I'm not so sure it's that good yet. But that is a big mistake. At this point, black could do very well by simply playing e5, or I think even better, just knight here. And just give him that pawn, and then just play e5. And black's got plenty of counterplay here. So white kind of messed up the technique side of this game. But after that move, he takes. And from now on, it's pretty easy, because he not only wins that pawn, but he's able to blockade the position. And again, he kind of messes up by letting this pawn get too strong. But I think I'll stop there. You can see that white has material, and the king, black's king is exposed. Maybe a few more moves. Let's goof around here. He should have played queen d3, by the way, just blockade the pawn. Yeah, and this was quickly over. These are not the best moves. I'll just put it that way. White got too much material here. Let's go a little quicker. This game is over pretty quickly. As you can see, a lot of material falling here. And there's a mate coming with rook there. Okay, so that was kind of fun. I think playing this gambit would be really fun, even over the board. It's a pretty sound gambit. Even against a very, very strong player, you could play this way. It's pretty reasonably sound. Let me show you another example that he sent. This is the other game he sent, which has maybe a little more It's a little briefer, a little quicker to see. So let me show you this. So you guys might be interested. Everybody's always asking me what to do against the French. Well, here's one possibility. Play the Milner-Berry, but play this particular line, because this gambit isn't really good enough if what black knows what he's doing, which he often does, because usually most players of the French have seen this a lot. They haven't seen this that much, and even if they have, it's a reasonable thing to do for black. Okay, that move's recommended in a lot of different sources. I think it might be the best move, actually. And it's recommended in my book, Play the French 4, actually. And this is actually the most critical response. I really like that answer. Everything else I think is just too slow, as it turns out. It turns out black's just better. And now, if black plays bishop takes, this is a very, very, very awkward pin. And white gets a lot of play, really a lot of play, because the king side's kind of weak over there, too. It's a real problem. But black can play here and get 2 pawns up this way. Although I think, I'm trying to remember whether I played there or queen takes b4 first. Not sure if it matters that much. Okay, rook there. And queen over, threatening to exchange queens. Now when you're 2 pawns up, white's got to be very careful about letting the queens go off, but he's getting the 7th rank. So he has some compensation here. Knight g5 is a big move. Just getting the bishop out almost anywhere and then bringing the other rook over to the queen side is going to be effective too. So he's got some compensation for the pawn. Nevertheless, I think black here can play... Okay, played there trying to sort of trap the rook. That worked out very poorly. I think just here getting castled. I'm not convinced that white has enough for a pawn here. Black has 1 extra protected passed pawn here, so white needs to prove compensation. And white has something here. Black's not like a full pawn up, but here you can play knight c6, and then, for example, knight d8, and just consolidate. Get your pieces kind of... It's a very solid pawn structure for black, so it's kind of hard to break through. Or you can play bishop c6. This advantage here is not very large. I'll say. For example, if black castles now, rook c1 is a terrific move. So black has to sort of play around here a little bit. But a position like this, for example, should be just fine for black. Maybe even a little better than fine. Or maybe the one I showed you with knight c6. So I'm not totally convinced about this. Certainly I don't think white gets an advantage. It might be white has just enough for a pawn. Instead of that, black played this move, which looks interesting, trying to sort of trap the rook. The problem is, look at this. And also bishop a3 was a tough move to mate. That would have been difficult. See, the problem is that it looks like that move, the bishop move, is a good move, but he can't actually take the rook. For example, this move, threatening here, and if takes, check, and actually black's completely lost here. See this position, his king is running out of room, is what it amounts to. And we're getting checkmate ideas. We're going to forget the rook in the corner. We're just going to maul block there. See, this is a fun line to play, and your opponent probably won't know it that well. And even if they know it, I mean, you've got some play here no matter what happens. So this is also a good move. Bishop a3 I think was even better, but now black makes a big mistake. Should just play knight e7. It's not that bad. It's an interesting position. I won't go into detail, but that move turns out to be terrible because now that square is not covered. And I don't know if there's much to see here. Now, yeah, here he really should have played a little more slowly. That's probably not the best move, but it's very clever. It's a very nice idea. Again, with the bishop b5 check idea if he takes with the king. So he has to take that way. Now again, if the rook comes back, you got the bishop b5 mating idea. And so here you just pin the rook. And I think black plays badly here, but it doesn't really matter because white's winning anyway. The problem here now is rook b7 is coming, and so white wins the whole rook. I won't show you the rest of the game. Okay, hi, I'd like to listen to you. I've got a huge exam coming up. Sad to see what I'm missing. Well, you can thank you very much, Remy Edits, and you can also come back and watch this on YouTube later. Everything's preserved. It's very interesting. My screen is frozen again. I hope you guys are doing okay there. I sent an email. Yeah, I did get that question, Alan, and we can even move to that next. So anyway, there is a possibility for playing against the French. I'm always being asked about what to play against the French. It's kind of a fun line. You have to learn the sidelines, of course, but that's fairly easy to do. Anybody else here asking anything? Go ahead, please, and you can talk with each other too. There we go. Question about the Grünfeld. I did get that. Let's turn to that as long as we're at it. Actually, before that, there's a question I've had for a couple of weeks. I want to do this right now. Quite a strong player sent me a question, a theoretical question about the Samish variation. And what's interesting about it is he also added a couple observations. In fact, maybe I'll put the observations first because they were absolutely excellent. This is really something. This is the sort of thing you could write a book about in the chess world. Things that are sometimes neglected in the chess world. Let me do that first, actually, and then I'll get back to his theoretical question. He makes an observation about what seems to be missing on books on defense. Quote, what seems to be missing from books on defense? They all discuss the tactics that might help, but none of them try to set out various structures that inferior positions can take and analyze the plans that result. In other words, usually you're worse because of the pawn structure. If it's some sort of, that's a very systematic way of looking at why people stand worse. Well, they stand worse because they have a weak pawn here or there. And there's hundreds of standard structures, just as you see in every opening book and every middle game book. You see all these structures that you're supposed to learn and how you learn how to handle. But it's always learning how to handle them from the positive point of view, the side that's trying to win. Or usually, that's the point. And it's all the characteristic tactics and all that sort of thing. So the point is, what book on defense really systematically, or even hardly at all, looks at the pawn structures that arise, and even the piece placements, but the typical positions that arise where you stand worse. It's known that you stand worse. And then not only explain why you stand worse, but actually talk about what you're going to do. Are you going to kind of sit on the position and make kind of useful moves or waiting moves because you can hold it? You've got to know whether that's true or not. And if not, what kind of active counterplay can you undertake? What would be the typical ways to get active counterplay? For example, is there some sort of characteristic pawn sacrifice that leaves you a pawn down, maybe even theoretically still worse, but with or manages to equalize because of the activity you get because of that pawn sacrifice? Often that's a very, very practical way to do that. So that's a fantastic question, and it's an idea for a book for everybody. I'm certainly going to, if I write anything about defense, that's going to get major, major, major consideration. I thought that was a wonderful question. He makes another comment. The same player, he says, just another observation. Just once, I'd like to see an author differentiate between objectively lost, inferior, equal, and superior positions in terms of defense. I think that's very interesting. So that's true. Again, that's true. It's always a side with the nominal advantage whose prospects and plans are outlined, and not the player who's trying to hold the balance or get the draw. So in other words, a lot of times we say, well, this is still, maybe you'll even say this is still drawable. It's probably still a draw, but white has chances or something like that. But without really explaining how the person would go about trying to draw that position or what makes it a drawable position. And what might actually kind of happen next. It's not, usually we kind of stop at some point, and if we do anything, we give some ideas for the side that's somewhat better, just so that maybe, I think there's a sort of psychological thing there, so that someone won't say, well, this is just a drawn position, and we're trying to encourage the side that, well, okay, maybe it's drawn, but you've got chances here. So we try, but what we don't do is explain to the defender what he should do, and I think that's a really excellent point. So I'm going to try and incorporate that into more of my own writing. Okay, here's the question, the theoretical question. It's about the Samish variation of the King's Indian defense. It's actually not quite a theoretical question, but it kind of is. And this is very interesting. I thought one reason for picking out this question is because this leads to such fascinating results and it's fascinating kinds of positions. And it's also the reason taking this has led to black. Originally, white almost always took the pawn sacrifice. You notice that pawn's hanging. And basically the Samish became less popular because of this. Kasparov in particular made this move popular. And in this game, he's accepting. And what I was going to say is that the Samish has come back a little bit. For example, Lars Schondorf has it as part of his repertoire in his D4 repertoire book. But he has, like almost everybody now, the top players are all playing this move, knight here. So they're allowing this, and guess what? That's a Maroxy bind position with the pawns covering the center. And it's against a dragon setup. So, but it's slightly different from the usual Maroxy bind, but I won't get into that. But this is because, for one thing, it's not easy to get this knight off by force, by exchanging, because the knight can retreat in some cases. But it's also an interesting position that black is usually willing to play in this, or might be willing to play. in the same-ish. More commonly, he plays, tries to keep things open for another second, waits for white to come in. And then there's countless things that can happen here, but basically this kind of position is extremely critical. This kind of thing where white plays here and black starts chasing him and black starts playing Benoni-like positions. But that's all neither here nor there, but I just want to give a little bit of context that you'll see knight ge2 a lot now if you play this way as black. Nevertheless, it's a good way to play for black, and it's also incredibly instructive because of what happens after accepting this pawn sacrifice. Okay, so white's a pawn up, and amazingly, black's done pretty well here. Black seems to have full compensation, at least that's what current theory says. And maybe it's worth talking about a little bit, like what the ideas are. Well, white's idea is obvious. He's a pawn ahead. and all he has to do is get his pieces out, and he simply pretty much wins the game. There's good solid center. There's no major weaknesses. What's black got? Well, black's got this beautiful outpost, which is usable by the knight, the rook, and the bishop, and even the other knight, because the other knight can come to d7 with tempo, and eventually it might get around to either e5 or d4. So and when black plays knight d7, let's just pretend I'm going to make a completely ridiculous move, then that bishop is unmasked, and this knight has a chance to come into the center and attack this pawn. So there's some sort of tactical kind of issues here too. Now b6 is a good move here, but there's also this idea of playing this way, attacking that weak square there, but also threatening to maybe attack this twice. And if the pawn has to be defended, there's a tactic based on knight takes f3 checkers, knight takes c4, something like that, with bishop takes c3 next. So there's a lot of tactics involved here right off the bat. So white can't go slowly here. And the main move now is probably knight d5. It's been played for years and years and years, but black is considered okay in these positions. So that's just something you might know about. In this game, he plays a somewhat less common move. And usually black plays knight d7 in this position, but you'll notice that now this knight's protected, so those little tactics I was talking about aren't as good. So knight d7 is pretty much the main move, and then often black plays knight de5, again threatening these kinds of things. But in this position, black plays b6, and that's a perfectly good move, and in fact it transposes in this game to another well-known line. The idea of b6 is that if black plays bishop e3, that's actually a big mistake, because knight b4 attacks c2 with a family fork, but especially the rook, and it also threatens knight d3 check, winning this pawn, and that's not only going to win your pawn back, but it weakens that long diagonal and isolates this. Let me show you that. If white plays some horrible move, well, this or something. Whoops, that was actually not so bad a move, maybe. Oh, except it's a terrible move because the king can't get out. Okay, so let's have white play king f2, check king g1. What I was trying to say about this is not only does that pawn fall, but this one's now loose on an open file, and it can be attacked by a lot of pieces, so it's going to fall too. So that would be disastrous. So the point is knight b4 is pretty much almost a winning move. It may not be that easy, but it's a very, very good move. So the bishop has to go the other way to stop knight b4. And that's nice, because then the bishop's decentralized. And we'll see what that means in a second. So this is all part of the question. He didn't talk about any of this in the question, but I wanted to show you this as background. Okay, now black here has played bishop here. I think Brischuk played that once. e6 is played sometimes to keep the knight out of d5. But in this game, he just plays very simply, bishop up. And white plays rook here. That's the most common move. Just try to get some pieces off here. It's hard to coordinate otherwise. And black can play knight d7 now and play the kind of position we were just talking about with the long diagonal. The knight's well placed coming to e5, maybe even comes to c5 sometimes. But he plays another common plan from these positions, which is a5, with the idea of knight to b4. Just for example, again, let's make a terrible move for white, and I'll show you that this knight b4 move tends to be a big threat for the same reason as before. Check, taking here, or check coming in there. So the question is, how do you stop that? Well, you can't really stop that easily without allowing something else happening. And so in this case, white allows it by playing that move. And I don't tend to like that move very much. I'm always very suspicious of that move. There's a game that was played among real top players, Wang Ho and Rajabov, which is this move. This happened, and this turned out to be equal. It's a little safer. Knight d5 is always very risky because black can take that knight. Another game, pretty simple for black was this, even though, let's just show you a couple moves here. Knight here, again with maybe this idea. The other knight comes over. Okay, so at least this time the bishop's getting out and white might get castled. But black just plays very straightforwardly here with this bishop here. So there's ideas of rook d2 or bishop d2. And there's still knight d2 because e3 is covered. So this position turns out to be about equal. Black gets his pawn back is what it amounts to. For example, let me just show you something where that might happen. I guess king f1 would be better, wouldn't it, because of the e3 square. And I think already you can simply win your pawn back with this move. I believe that's true. Might not be true, but I think it is. And black has two bishops, so that's enough for a pawn. Maybe not more than enough, but it's enough. So in our game, white tried this move. And I just want to show you this typical position. It may not look that bad for black for white at first, but the problem is this is going to break up the center. And white isn't going to be able to take that because there's going to be tactics, either on this square or that square. And if white takes this, of course, then you've got this problem. So, and bishop takes b2 also. And black still has attacks with e6 and maybe even f5. So, in the game, white plays knight down. And you know, this looks natural, but it doesn't really help very much. This just shows you how black gets compensation in all these positions because it's pinned, because this pawn's pinned. I won't go any further than that. It tends to be slightly better for black, that position. Remember, white is a pawn to start with, so we can afford some negative things happening. Okay, so this is where the question comes up. This was played in a game, actually, I believe. Or at least something very close to this was played. And now the question is, okay, first of all, instead of bishop b2, this is an extremely strong move. Notice that this is pinned because the rook is hanging. And if black plays something like this, then we have rook over, and there's no way to protect that bishop properly. And if the bishop comes back, we have here. Now we're threatening a4. If a4 happens, you can take that, and that drags the bishop off of this. And black gets his pawn back with two bishops, and two bishops are always just very strong in the endgame. And actually, nobody has any more weaknesses, so black's simply better. So really, already you can see how black could have gotten a good game here. Let's see if I have any more. Yeah, my fault. Actually, after rook c8, maybe not b5 immediately. Oh, because the rook's protected, and so that could happen. So take first, and if pawn takes, then b5, and this pawn's going to fall very quickly. There's some complications, but they're all good for black, even if you try to play d6 there. And you might ask, well, why not just there? But then, and maybe, oh, because the rook gets to c2. Yeah, the rook's coming to c2 with check, and that gives black at least some advantage. Okay, anyway, so that's just a sideline, but it shows you what's going on there. That this whole position, what's going on in this position basically? Well, black has two bishops. This bishop's not very good, but it can either get out that way, or more likely, as we've seen, it'll crack open. It'll help crack open the center. And in the meantime, black's just better developed. White's king is still somewhat exposed, and these pieces aren't out yet. So that's plenty for a pawn. Also, you know, these are weak pawns, so it's not much of an extra pawn. In the game, he plays this way, or maybe this is the line I show. Oh, okay, so here's where the question stopped. He said he kind of doubts black's compensation here. Do you see any better? And I tend to like black even here, even though this time white's managed to. These pawns aren't any weaker than these pawns, really, because that's a backward pawn there. But the bishops are quite strong, and this move e6 is going to break up the center. And the king's still a little exposed. And just as an example, I guess my main line I was going to give was this. And now, remember, the bishop can always slither over here, too, to attack the king. And that's what he does. This pawn turns out to be weaker than it is strong, because there's rook c5 kind of moves coming, or just doubling on the file, which is, I think, what happens in my analysis. This is all just analysis, but it's hard to avoid this for white. He wants to defend that pawn. If he loses that pawn, why shouldn't he stand worse? Then I have black just coming up, although black doesn't really have to. He could play bishop d6 also, but this is just an example. And now, one easy way, if you want to just show that black's at least equal, if I were black, I'd make some slow moves here. Bishop d6, bishop e7 maybe. But if you want to equalize, you can immediately take this and play here. And maybe even black has a theoretical advantage here because his pawns are slightly better, but it's this game should be drawn. Okay, so so that's the answer to the way I look at this question is black does have permanent compensation in these positions, starting with the point where you were talking about after a4 or before that. There just doesn't. It's too hard for white to coordinate, and people have been trying to make this work for white for so long. These kinds of positions, and they just haven't had much luck. There's just now you almost have to play something like knight c1. You have to try something, and once those pawns are weakened and black gets the bishop pair, it's trouble. Especially because there is a break in the center. Without the break in the center, it might not be so easy. I think this move actually gives black some advantage, actually. Okay, so that's an answer to that. But I thought those observations about the defense were just absolutely fantastic. And this is a fascinating line to play for white and black, by the way, so you might want to do some more investigation of it. Oh yeah, Alan's question. Okay. Alan's question. Hey, I'll flip the board for Alan's question. Let me do that. Flip. Okay, now we're going to look at it from black's point of view, something I never seem to do, but there you go. A little easier to understand things when you're looking from the right point of view. Okay, Alan says, I've been happy with my record in many openings, but there's one opening I really struggle with. It's the Grünfeld defense. So much so that I've taken up the King's Indian. Okay, so the Grünfeld defense is this fella here. And the King's Indian is if black plays this way instead, and then if white does play e4, it's playing with d6, not d5. That's the difference. Okay, the problem seems to be that I enter long lines of theory, sometimes lasting as much as 20 moves. My opponent knows all the theory, and we enter many different endgame positions, all lost for black. The push of the center pawns, supported by a move of the entire kingside pawns gradually forward, seems to create an inevitable loss for me, and I have no answer. I'm in the process of learning the Grünfeld again to give it another chance. So I don't totally understand that. I think you're talking about the queenside pawns, probably. There are lines where white ends up moving his kingside pawns, but in most cases he's moving his queenside pawns, right? So, I mean, just for example, the main lines here with this kind of thing. White plays either b4 or plays knight e1 and knight d3 and plays for c5, c5 and b4, b5. Alan, you might want to confirm that that's correct. By the way, my screen's frozen again, so I'm hoping these moves are getting through. If not, I'm not happy. You have to tell me that. This happened to me last week too. Aha! No, now I'm getting them. I just have to keep refreshing my screen. Okay. So yeah, Alan, you might want to confirm that was that's what you're talking about with these kingside pawns coming forward. Unless you meant the Grünfeld defense, the kingside pawns came forward. But anyway, let's just assume that you meant the queenside there. So you're frustrated with the King's Indian. Then you said, I'm in the process of learning the Grünfeld again to give another chance. Mostly I'm going through the Fritz Trainer by Lubomir Fatochnik, which is pretty good. That's me saying that. But I would welcome your input into the matter. And so the first thing I might mention is that the Chess 24 video series on the Grünfeld by Svidler is absolutely excellent. It's sort of the standard right now, and really even top players are using it. It's a complete repertoire for the Grünfeld. It's a lot more complete than Fatochnik's, but it's also by someone who's the world's greatest Grünfeld expert and explains things probably as well as you could possibly imagine. So I don't know how you can get that besides actually joining. On the other hand, if you join, you get, I don't know, 30, 40, 50, 60 videos or so for free, and you get the regular Chess 24 benefits. So you might think about that. So there are a lot of benefits to joining. There may be another way to just get just the video, but I'll leave that up to you. So back to d4 and the King's Indian. You ask, my knowledge of Grandmaster games on it is vague. That means I think in this case it means the King's Indian. You might want to confirm that. It has gone out of favor in top chess since Garry Kasparov gave up on it. Hasn't it gone out of favor? It's a question. Since Garry Kasparov gave up on it, I know it used to be very popular. The King's Indian is as popular as it was in the Soviet era, I know, but it's a useful reply. Yeah, it is very useful because you can play it against the English Opening or Knight F3. Actually, after a lull, the King's Indian is becoming pretty popular again. It's actually quite respectable. I just went through some games from the last 5 years just to see who's playing it. A lot of 2,500 to 2,700 grandmasters are playing it, because they need wins in Swiss systems. They can't just draw. And the King's Indian is a good way to try and win. It's a good opening to try to win with, as opposed to some of the D4, D5 kind of things, for example. But I wanted to mention at the very, very top, we still have a whole number of players who've used it quite a bit. Grischuk, Rajabov, Nakamura, Ding Liren, Topalov, and some other people going a little further back, but they're still playing it. They've still played it in the last 5 years. Ivanchuk, Aronian, Bologan, who's also written a DVD about the King's Indian and a book. Mamad Yarov, one of the top players in the world, Ponomaryov, and going down just a little bit in rating, but still tremendous players, Gawain Jones, Kazimzhanov, and you'll even find if you look around, you'll see games by Carlsen and Geary and Kramnik. Kramnik used to play it quite a bit, even though it's definitely not in their style, and they don't play it very much. But they still play it, so how bad can it be? If these guys can play it, you obviously have nothing special to fear against the kind of players you're going to play, or even if you played them. The opening wouldn't be the problem. There might be some other problem if you're playing against a 2800, but not that one problem. Okay, so the endgame position at the Grünfeld. Well, that's interesting, because I don't know the kingside pawns coming down. That doesn't happen very often. It's interesting. Let's take a quick look. So you talk about in the exchange variation. Talk about the Grünfeld with the two center pawn endgame against the kingside minority. Okay, so you're saying that in some of these endings, yeah, I don't think the kingside pawns are probably killing you here. Okay, so you're saying you get to some funny endings, or I don't know if it's the knight f3 or the bishop c4 or whatever, but you get to some of these endings. Oh, there's so many ways to play this. I don't want to mess this up. There's bishop e3, and there's bishop e2, and there's rook b1, but what happens is eventually, well, even maybe this could happen. For example, here's a kind of ending that can happen. This sort of thing. These pawns. It's not much of a minority. It's 5 to 4, but I wouldn't exactly call it a minority. It's more like just a central majority for white. This is the majority, is in the center, not the king side. And it's pretty seldom that these pawns take part in that ending. They can, but certainly not on a regular basis, I wouldn't think. So you'd have to show me your games. You can send me some games, Alan. I'd be glad to look at them. Nice free benefit to the show. I'll take a look at them. If I don't put them on the show, I can answer you personally too. Feel free. Ask I am Watson at chessclub.com. And so that's what you were talking about. What I was going to say is, in general, you asked the question, what is the most common reply to 1d4 these days, or basically isn't there one? And what I was going to say is that at the very, very top, of course, you'll see a lot of d4, d5 because it's safer. It tends to be safer. The safest defenses begin with this. For example, the Slav is pretty safe, especially the classical Slav, if you play dc4, as opposed to the semi-Slav, which can get pretty hairy because you're not very well developed. So you get a lot of tactics. It's fun, but a lot of tactics. This is a pretty safe line. The most common line at the very top is probably just the Queen's Gambit declined. You'll see this an awful lot. Very solid. But of course, your winning chances are less, and these guys at 27, 2800, a lot of times a draw is a fine result as black. Whereas for you and I, it probably isn't. You're probably trying to win. After those d4, d5, I'd say the most solid lines are the e6 systems, or these things, where you play either the Nimzo Indian, very solid, you get developed quickly, or maybe the Queen's Indian, maybe even the Bogo Indian. You get your piece out quickly and you get castled. Very safe and solid. Much more so than the Grünfeld and the King's Indian, where you're giving up the center. That's the difference, isn't it? Is that in the Grünfeld and the King's Indian, here you're giving up the center for the sake of tremendous counterplay. And it's great to get the counterplay, but you are giving up the center, so you can get attacked, and you can also get bowled over by these pawns in the center, which is what you're saying happens. And the same thing with the King's Indian, right? You've given up the center. Look at those big center pawns. So naturally, you can be attacked. That means these pawns can advance at some point, and it also means you have less space to play around with. So every one of these openings is completely fine. Great players play all of them. They're all very popular. But if you want to be safer, you would probably end up playing either the Nimzo Indian or d4, d5. And if you want to get some more active chances, you probably want to play knight f6 with either a King's Indian or a Grünfeld, something like that. That's what I would say offhand. I don't know if anybody else disagrees with that. We can have some more opinions being thrown in there. Okay, what have I got this week? Oh, and the other thing I wanted to say is, of course, you have to, whatever you play, you're going to have to study, because even d4, d5, you can get mated quickly and get, you can still get in tons of trouble here, too, if you don't study. So basically what it amounts to is you have to know whatever you're playing, know the ideas, and know some concrete lines. Know as many concrete lines as you can, understand the positions, and play them a lot and get practice with them. It's going to be true no matter what you play. And that's even more true. It's even more important with these lines where you give up a lot of space, like the Grünfeld and the King's Indian. I like the King's Indian a lot, and I like the Grünfeld. I think they're more fun to play than the d4, d5 openings, but they do come with some extra responsibility in terms of studying and understanding. Okay, so then what do we have next? Anybody else got anything to say here on the chat? I hope I'm not missing anything. Doesn't look like it right offhand. And remember, you can talk with each other too. And you can see, are there any other Grünfeld or King's Indian players around here? Might be a question to ask the listeners. Or what else do you play? What do people play against d4? Let's just throw out a general question there. And it doesn't have to be a question to me. It can be just sort of a comment about what you play, and we can talk about why you might play that or might not play that. And in the meantime, if I don't have anything there, let me just continue, even though it's almost time to stop. Here's a question, by the way. I don't know if I ever got to this. This is from a long, long time ago, and I was looking through my list of openings covered, and I didn't see this. So if I'm repeating this, forgive me, but if I can't remember it, you probably can't either, and it won't hurt anything. This is a question about the Queen's Gambit declined that I know I didn't answer for quite a while. I don't know if I ever got around to it. I learned to play the Queen's Gambit declined exchange variation. Let me show you what that is. The classical way with the minority attack. And that would mean something like, here's the Queen's Gambit declined exchange variation. And with the minority attack would mean, for example, something like, let me just make some notes here. For example, maybe something like this, and black comes over, and white just starts playing things like b4, b5, and tries to take here. That's a well-known plan, okay? Then he says, I know that you can also play for a central break with f3 and e4, but I've never really understood how that works. Can you explain the key ideas? So I have this game here. It's actually a Kasparov game. And maybe I did show it, but if I did, I don't think I showed the notes anyway. So just to show you what the basic ideas are. I think if I did show you this, I think I kind of just whipped it out. So let's finish up this today by showing you a little bit about playing with the f3 line in the Queen's Gambit, because it's also very instructive. One thing that white has in the Queen's Gambit is 2 center pawns to 1. So it makes a lot of sense to try and advance those center pawns. Because what other advantage do you have, really? Well, and you could argue you've got this minority attack thing, but it's very hard to make that work, for one thing. And black does have good responses to that. So, so let's take a look at this. This was the order of the game. Okay, so if you're going to play f3, you have to play knight e2 first, not knight f3, obviously. And there's that f3 move right there. Okay, so the question is, what are you trying to do, and what is black trying to do? Well, what you're trying to do is just simply play e4. And if he gives you a chance, play e5, and then after the knight moves back, f4, and then f5, and then just bowl the king over. That doesn't maybe sound that horrible, but it is. If white gets those moves in, it's pretty much resignable. And that's why this is such an attractive position for white. What's black's idea? Black's idea, well, one of black's main ideas is to play this move c5. Not immediately, but but he'll try to play this move c5. And the idea then is whenever white plays e4, boom, that center falls apart. You can't take back with a pawn there. And once the center falls apart, white's attack is not going to be as strong, if there's an attack at all. In fact, it's hard to even hold on to that pawn sometimes. So that's the basic structural issue going on. Now, what else can happen? Sometimes white play moves like g4 and knight g3, usually before he's castled, but very seldom. That's a rare theme. What else can black do? Black's other ideas are simply to simplify. Get that bishop off, maybe play knight here, move this knight, get these bishops off, and just get his pieces out. And that in conjunction with c5 are the two main ideas. Okay, so in this game, black plays knight g6. Let me show you this. This is one of the main lines, is to play here, but it does allow the central break. And let me just show you what happens when things go wrong. Okay, let's say black plays that move, and white takes it, which may not even be the best move, but it's worth showing just to show this pawn storm idea. I want to show you how this pawn storm goes. See this happening here? f5, f6, just all the pieces come blasting over to the king's side. Both rooks are going to come into play for the mating attack. You've got your good bishop left. Your bad bishop is the one that's disappeared off the board, the one on the same color as the center pawns. So that's the idea, is this sort of this huge attack. Black would have to counterattack real quickly. This actually was a game. If black plays here, then maybe a game with this. f5. Bishop d7, knight f4. Just put all those pieces towards the king's side and see what happens. Now you've got f6 ideas. Also, knight takes g7 ideas would be here. b4, f6, threatening check. G takes f6, queen d2, and it's mate. There's no stopping here. Just to show you how deadly that f4, f5. That's what I meant by what the plan is. The plan is just roll those pawns forward, and if you achieve e5 and f4, f5, you're going to win 90% of the time. Black needs an immediate counterattack, mate, or win of material or something to overcome that idea. Okay, so instead of king h8, there's c5 in a position like this. So what are we looking at? We're looking at that, c5. That's a little different. Now you've got a little bit of a counterattack, so it's not quite as easy. But I think you'll still find white doing very well here. Knight f4 probably anyway. Yes. b6. That's to get the bishop out in the counter. He doesn't mind losing that because he's got pressure this way anyway. So he doesn't mind losing the, or he hopes he doesn't mind losing the d pawn, but he's going to lose it in conjunction with this attack. Notice the bishop has nowhere to go, so he has to take that. And now I think taking on, d5. And now notice that the rook's in play. And the queen can march over here somewhere. And even this knight might come up to e4. There are just too many attacking pieces. This was actually a game. Bishop here. Check. Queen takes. d5. White could also won other ways, but this is pretty convincing. See, look at this. The pawns are just smashing forwards here. And then this move. And there's just too much going on here. For example, if the rook moves, there's the idea of bishop d5, because if queen takes, you have queen g6 check. Oh, you don't. Excuse me, my fault. That was a little hallucination on my part. Okay, so how would you play this? Maybe knight d5. Threatening this square. And you can't even play knight h7. Okay, that should work. So maybe something like this happens. And you can take the rook, or you can just kind of keep attacking. Something like this. This is an overwhelming position. Great, great, great position. The queen is in terrible shape here. So, okay. Kind of a fun position. But in this game, we have this knight g6 move, and now it's normal to play bishop e6 at this point. And I won't show you any theory here because we're getting late in the show. A popular move now is this, and the reason to show this is good because it has the same themes, e4. Now the idea again is e5 followed by f4, and black really has to do something about that. So he takes just to loosen up this center a little bit and get his pieces out. And at least there's no f4, f5 anymore, is the idea. but I think you'll find that this position is just extremely strong. Now we have the idea of knight e4 to d6 or c5, and this knight looks pretty stupid too after e5. It looks kind of like stuck out there. c5, d5, bishop g4. Those pawns in the center are just going to be trouble. e6, blasting away. And then you're threatening takes, so he probably takes, but then you're on this square too, so bishop takes g6. And you take again, threatening this. Bishop takes, and I think the best move now is just here, yeah. And now take back, and this guy can't even be defended, because if knight f6, rook takes f6, so I think you just give up at this point. Anyway, just to show you how that's the idea of this line, basically, is the advance of the center. And black has to try to stop it. And I'm showing this from white's point of view. If black is clever, he can... oh, there go the pawns again. At least this time there's no f5, f6. But white has a big center, and he's very happy. Now there's going to be f5 followed by queen takes g6, so black does have to do something about that, so he defends the g-pawn. And then f4, breaking open lines. It's not so much that f5 is going to happen, it's that open f file is going to happen. And maybe I showed you guys this game, I'm not sure. But white just gets a better and better and better game here. He anchors the knight in on the queen on the king side and gets a knight on f5, the famous Kasparov knight. And couple more moves. Well, he gives up the exchange. I guess there's nothing left to do really here. It's just white has way too many good squares, and that knight is so powerful on the 6th rank, right in the center. So, and I won't show you the rest of the game. So that's an answer to the overall question from white's point of view about how to advance on the king side and how to get an attack going on the center and on the king side. What you're kind of doing in these f3 lines. So just to show you that one more time real quickly, that came from a Queen's Gambit, classical Queen's Gambit. You should know these moves anyway, or at least this basic position. This is your basic Queen's Gambit exchange position. And white has the option of putting a knight here or a knight here. And if he puts the knight on e2, he's usually planning to play f3 and e4. Sometimes he castles queenside, by the way, but in this case he castled kingside. And then just played for f3 and e4. And I showed you black defending poorly. It's possible for black to defend this position, but it's not easy. And most people avoid this position as black, even though good players have played it and done okay with it. I think the best thing to do is a very early bishop e6 and c5. Like I said, get that move c5 in quickly, maybe rook c8, and sort of take it from there. Maybe try to simplify at some point. Okay? Okay, so thank you everybody for listening. I hope that meant something. I hope I didn't stop you from... Aha! I actually have a thing I missed here. Anthony Allen, who's often contributing good things here. I usually play the Slav against the Queen's Gambit. Send me a question about the Slav, Anthony. Ask IamWatson@chessclub.com, or you can go to that Facebook page and put a note there. Or if you're on ICC, you can message John L. Watson. Ask some question. What's the line that gives you the most trouble against the Slav? Or send me a good game that you played in the Slav. Or even a bad game you played in the Slav. Send me a game and we'll talk about it. We'll talk about the Slav generally, we'll talk about your game, and have some fun. You can do that at any time. Remember, ASKIMWATSON@chessclub.com. And you can also put a message under, this broadcast will be up on YouTube forever. And if after the show you see it up there, you can, oh thank you, you can put a comment below the YouTube in the comment section, and I'll read that, and I'll treat that as a question too, if you want to be lazy about it, because then you'll have the video right in front of you, and you'll have the question right in mind. Thank you, Jordan. So, the Chess Cafe. Well, so you send me an email, Jordan, because I don't know where the Chess Club is, which Starbucks it is, so you'll have to, and I will try to make it there for sure. Thank you, everybody, and I will see all of you next week, I hope. Bye-bye.